Hey guys, it's Fred and Sheila McCoy. We are at the Hatfield McCoy Museum in Liberty, Kentucky today. You can go to fredmccoy.com, go to the top of the page, click on wherever you want to go from there. Sheila's behind the camera.
Hi guys, hope you're having a great day.
We've done a couple other videos today already. We like doing everything down here where we've got boards and pictures and documents, everything readily available to us. Okay. So we can prove our point. This is going to be a Keeping It Real segment. Okay. Anybody that knows anything about our Keeping Real segments, first of all, they're probably controversial. They shouldn't be, because we try to make them so cut and dried, so clean, with documentation and proof that they shouldn't be controversial, because we prove our case. Okay. Which one? The one we're going to do today is going to be on a newspaper article that ran in the Herald Dispatch. Okay. In Huntington, West Virginia. Tri-State native helms his historical production of Hatfield McCoy Feud. And this is 2012 and May the 20th. Look it up. You can Google it in the newspaper. May the 20th, 2012. And the story is going to be on Daryl Fetty. Daryl Fetty is actually one of the producers on the Hatfield McCoy mini-series.
Go this side.
Hatfields and McCoys, yeah. And you can read it there, that stuff there. Mostly I'm going to go over, she's going into another story right here. This is War and Peace of the Big Sandy River. Okay. The author of this one is Dean King. And we're going to discuss that one in a minute. You can go ahead and scroll down so they can look over it. They can stop their screen.
So this is going to be part of this video.
This is going to be part of this video as well.
Okay.
Now, guys, listen. We have covered some of this stuff in other videos dealing with Hubert Bay McCoy. And if you haven't watched those videos, and I'm sure you haven't, because they're some of the lowest viewing videos we've got. I guess it's where I start out slow on them, or I'm trying to read. Yeah. And everybody, but if you would just look at the information, I think you'll find them interesting and you'll want to follow through. This is Daryl Fetty talking with Kevin Costner on set while they're making the movie. Okay. Now, it tells about Daryl Fetty's history there. I think Daryl Fetty, from what I can understand, I think he's actually from Huntington, West Virginia, or something like that. Don't hold me to it. It's in the story. You can read that. That part of the story doesn't interest me. What interests me on these stories is always what you see in the yellow. That's what stands out. That's the hard part to buy. Okay. Daryl Fetty says Alan Hatfield. Now, Alan Hatfield, from what I can understand, was related to Daryl Fetty's first wife. And Alan Hatfield, who had been a police chief in Mate 1 in his younger days. One day in the late 1940s, it was actually 1947, okay. Alan Hatfield had a confrontation with a McCoy boy. He was going to arrest the McCoy for public drunkenness. Now, let me explain to you about the public drunkenness part. Okay. Alan Hatfield come into the saloon. Hubert Bay, his brother Jim McCoy, and several other of the coal miners had gotten off from the Red Jacket Coal Company that day. They went to the Blue Goose Saloon in Mate 1, and they had them a couple of beers. They'd only been there like an hour when this all went down. So, I mean, they couldn't have been drunk. Well, I guess they could have been if they'd been drinking straight whiskey straight down the whole time they was there, but they wasn't. They usually stopped there, according to the family, to drink them a couple of beers on the way home to try to get back then they shot. It was called shooting coal. You would drill a hole back into the coal seam. You would stuff it with dynamite. You'd run around the rib there and hide and stick far to the wick, and it would blow the coal out of the seam of coal, and you'd load down a buggy and haul it outside. Wow. So that powder got into just like shooting a gun a bunch, and you get powder in your nose or in your mouth or your throat after you go shoot on the shooting range. And that's what they were doing. Now, Alan Hatfield had shot a man 7 months before. He shot Hubert Bay McCoy. And so he didn't have the best reputation. He had a reputation of being abusive. He had a reputation of wanting to be like Sid Hatfield and Devil Lance Hatfield. That's who he wanted to model himself after. And he'd done shot a man earlier. So Hubert Bay, when he started to take his buddy to jail, Hubert Bay said, if you're going to take him to jail, you're taking me with him. And he was going along to protect them, more or less.
Okay.
Just got out of World War II, war hero.
Survivor, yeah.
And a survivor.
Wow.
Now, he says here, now this is Daryl Fetty talking to the Huntington Herald leader. He says Allen had a confrontation with a McCoy boy. He was going to arrest the McCoy for public drunkenness, but the kid had a .22 pistol and started shooting at Allen as he was coming up the steps of the hotel where the guy had run to. Now, I'll tell you a story here. When you get over here to Rio Hatfield, which is where the story originated from back in 2011, I think Daryl Fetty gave his interview in 2012. Okay. And right. Rio Hatfield actually gave his in 2011 to Dean King.
Okay.
So some of this, or maybe all of it, whatever, came from Rio Hatfield. That's the first one to post this type story. But he says he's coming up the stairs, and as he's coming up the stairs, the McCoy shoots Allen Hatfield 3 times. Well, it's funny because they said that he had 3 bullets in his back. So I guess he's coming up the stairs backwards. Or usually when you're shot in the back, you're usually going in the opposite direction. But we won't get into that part. Let's just stick with the facts. As old
just the facts.
As Jack, whatever his name would say on Dragnet. 22 pistol and started shooting at Hatfield as he was coming up the steps to the hotel the guy had run into. The old man Hatfield just kept coming after him like John Wayne. He got to the top of the stairs, jerked the gun away from him, and took the young McCoy to jail. Now, that's a little bit different story than what Rio says over here, but he says he took the McCoy to jail. Allen had been shot 3 times. Now, it goes anywhere from 2 times to 5 times. Different newspapers, different stories that's been written and interviewed these people, but it goes anywhere from 2 to 5. But in this story, Daryl Fetty says that he was shot 3 times with his little pistol. Because this guy was a Hatfield, the New York Times sent a reporter down to the backwoods to get some juice on the feud story again. Mate One's police chief was lounging on the porch, nursing his wounds, and the reporter asked, "Well, sir, what do you intend to do now?" Allen said, "I reckon in a little while I'll go down to the doc's office and get these bullets out." He never got around to it. When I knew Allen Hatfield, he was in his 80s and still had the bullets in him from the little brush up. Now that's a tough man. That is John Wayne in real life. Well, I tell it and tell it and tell it. Allen Hatfield may have been a lot of things. He wasn't no John Wayne. Right. He did take something after Devil Lance Hatfield. He took his cowardness because he was more, once upon a time he was called River Allen because he lived on the river down at the Tug River. Okay. Because there was another Creek Allen Hatfield that lived up behind Blackberry Grade School. So he was known as Creek Allen, and this one was known as River Allen until years later, and then we started hearing a story about Chicken Allen.
Yeah. And
we thought Chicken Allen was a rooster fighter. Everybody back home fights roosters. Or raised chickens. Who's Chicken Allen? Well, we finally found out 1947 after he killed his 2nd victim and was sent to prison or sentenced to 5 years hard labor that he became known as Chicken Allen instead of River Allen. Now, that is the story by the Huntington Herald Dispatch. Okay. And Sheila and I, well, we done our first book on it, but we sent a copy of this book and we called several times to the editor in the Huntington Dispatch at the time. Ask him for a correction. Ask him do the research. Prove us wrong. Prove us wrong. Right. Never done a correction. Never attempted to prove us wrong. You can't prove us wrong. It's a true story with all the news stories that we got. Police Chief Hatfield held as McCoy Slayer. Here's just one that we've got on this board. But, and we got over 200 on the walls in here, and there's even more than that. This was the story by the Huntington Herald Dispatch. Now let's go over here. We've covered it before, so I won't be brief on it. But here's the story War and Peace. And guys, listen, it's not hard to Google these. Google Tri-State newspaper, Hatfields and McCoys, Daryl, Fetty. It'll come up. And Google War and Peace, the Big Sandy River, Granta Magazine, Granta, I believe it is, Granta Magazine. And it will come up. And down here on this one, this is Rio Hatfield talking to Dean King. I'm not going to go through all this other stuff. Did you show that already?
Yeah, I've done.
Okay.
We've gone through there and showed it all. Yeah.
Okay.
I can go back again.
No, that's fine. In 1947, this is Rio Hatfield talking to Dean King a year before Fetty gave his story. And Rio says, in 1947, decades after the last gun was fired, the feud almost started up again. This time, Rio's grandfather, Allen Hatfield, the chief of police of Matewan, West Virginia, was to blame when he went with another officer to raid a Brody house. An angry patron grabbed the gun of the other officer and shot Hatfield twice in the back. My grandfather turned and shot him dead, says Rio. The man happened to be a McCoy. Afterwards, Allen sat in a rocker cooling, talking to a reporter about the incident. The infamous Hatfield-McCoy feud had long been over, but now a Hatfield who had a bullet hole through his shoulder and a slug in his hip had just killed a McCoy. Hatfield finally ended the chat by saying that he believed he'd go down to the hospital now and get the bullet removed from his hip. Hatfield shoots McCoy at the scene of the famous feud. The paper blazed the next day. Feud revived. Rio Hatfield II says he disliked McCoy's on principle and never had any intentions of ever making amends with him. Never considered it. He never had planned on it. And that's what he said during his, when he was doing the peace treaty with Ron McCoy. Rio from Waynesboro, Virginia, not from Pike County, not from Mingo County, not from Logan County, Waynesboro, Virginia, and Ron McCoy from Durham, North Carolina. Hatfield and McCoy, nothing to do with the mountains. Ron didn't even know he was related to the Hatfields and McCoys till he was 35 years old. First thing he does is follow suit against Jim Vance's great-grandson. These stories are almost too unbelievable to believe. And I know she's going to show you a picture of Allen Hatfield in his old, this is right before he died. This is when he was in his 80s before he died. And it's sad that I didn't have this ready. But guys, if you will, you can put it on me. If you will, Google Phoebe Judge, Hatfield and McCoy saga, SAGA, radio interview. Okay. And it should come up. Phoebe Judge, North Carolina radio station, and she interviewed Rio Hatfield and Ron McCoy on the radio because Ron has since wrote a book. So they're on there trying to sell his book. And in fact, the book that Rio talks about, she asked him, she says, Rio, tell us about your grandfather being the last Hatfield to kill a McCoy. And he says, oh yeah, that's well documented in a book. Well, it's documented in Rob McCoy's book that didn't know he was related to Randall McCoy until he was 35 years old. It's well documented from the same story I just read that Rio Hatfield gave Dean King. It's well documented, the same story he gave to Ron McCoy. And he says, well, that was in the Washington Post. It was in the Washington Post in 2013 or something like that. And it's the same story that was carried by the Associated Press that Rio Hatfield had given Dean King on the Granta magazine. So the initial story came from Rio Hatfield. It's very interesting. You don't have to listen to the whole radio interview. Go to like 6 minutes and 34 seconds or 6 minutes, and you'll hear her ask Rio about the story, and you'll hear Rio in his own words, in his own voice, tell exactly the same story that was just told. And now he says, because we asked several years ago when we sent the story to the Herald Dispatch, asking for a correction, we also sent it to Rio Hatfield. We asked to have the body exhumed of his great-grandfather. And let's look at the bullets. Let's see the 3 bullets that went to his grave with him. Now Rio tells Phoebe Judge, she asked him about the bullets, and he says, oh, no, he had the bullets removed. And she said, do you still have the bullets? And he said, no, they lost them. Really? What would we give to have 3 bullets or even one bullet put into a Hatfield by a McCoy? Or into a McCoy by a Hatfield? We don't care either way. What an artifact that is to have in a museum. Mm-hmm. But yet they lost them. Something as important a relic as that. Last thing she's going to show you, and we've showed you before, but you don't have to go up close to them, but these are all the newspapers. Not all of them. We couldn't put them all on here.
Yeah, we ran out of room.
We wouldn't have enough room for anything else. But that's newspapers. You
Over
can
here.
scan by if you want.
Over here, son.
But this is where he had been killed. That's where that board goes right there.
Yeah.
The empty spot. I'll
Yeah.
put it back.
Yeah, I think I got you taking it off, but I'm just saying,
And
these are,
that's all where the Alan Hatfield was indicted, arrested, charged, convicted, sentenced for what he done to Hubert Bay
right.
McCoy. So guys, it's Fred and Sheila McCoy. Once again, we're keeping it real in the Hatfield McCoy Museum. You know, people talks about pictures, people talks about all kinds of things. This is nothing to do with this story, but Randall and Jim McCoy. There's Jim McCoy, Randall's oldest son. There's Randall McCoy. You know, they wrote, for years, they have written that Randall McCoy, he left, he sold the property on Blackberry, and he never ever returned. Really? A picture's worth 1,000 words, guys.
That's his will, right?
That's Randall McCoy. That's his well on Bob Scott's property. And where you go to now, this is just a replica of the well from back then. There's the old picture. Mm-hmm. And here's what we did. But if you ever get up in Hardy, Kentucky, or Blackberry Ford, make sure you stop. He'll welcome you in. And I'll tell you something else. Next door to him there in that first brick on the right, as you go across the bridge, is Neil Warren. And Neil Warren, I've been going to mention it in all of our videos of Jimmy Wolford, because Jimmy Wolford was crazy about Neil Warren.
Yeah. And
we've always liked Neil Warren. He's a real good guy. He's like me. He'll talk you to death, but he'll also tell you some good history. So other than that, it's Fred and Sheila McCoy, Hatfield McCoy Museum, Liberty, Kentucky. And Sheila, you got something to say?
Please like, subscribe, and share. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you all.